2011. That's 707-785-2011.
Hi, this is Jim Corbett. You're listening to KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM.
It is Friday, October the 27th. Good morning. I'm Leigh and Lindsey back from a film shoot down in Central California. It is a gorgeous blue day, but chilly today, about 43 degrees. I have Scott and Tree Mercer of Mindanoma Whale and Seal Study here with me in the studio. We're going to get to them in just a moment, and we are broadcasting on YouTube again today, so you can see us here in the studio. We're going to be talking about the health of the ocean and the future of climate change and things like that, and that's just coming up in just a second. This is a presentation that they gave recently at the Point Arena Lighthouse, but first we have a few announcements. Peggy Berryhill, our very own Peggy Berryhill, is going to be on a panel today up in Mendocino at the Mendocino Arts Center at the Native Arts Expo, and that's going to be going today and tomorrow. And for information, you can go to the Mendocino Art Center's website, and it is put on by also Eric Wilder Graphics, who helped coordinate the event. Then we have another thing about Peggy, the documentary that she was the executive producer of, Town Destroyer, is going to be on PBS tonight on KQED at 8 o'clock Pacific. And again on Monday, the 20th at 9 p.m. So tonight at 8 o'clock and then 9 p.m. on Monday. And then we have the Shindig Social Club today, Friday. They have some great grilled sandwiches and salads and soups and sweets available for purchase, as well as natural wine, beer, and non-alcoholic beverages. That's going to be 5:30 to 8 p.m. tonight at Shindig up in the Sea Ranch off Verdant View and Annapolis Road. We have this weekend for sure the Gualala Farmers Market, and I was beginning to wonder when those were going to end. I know that one up towards Fort Bragg and Mendocino is going to be ending. I think this is the last weekend. Do you guys know anything about our local farmers market?
I really don't. I know that they go until, I think, early November, so maybe a few more Saturdays.
Maybe, okay. And this is also the weekend for the Pay and Take clothing store, so that's going to be at the down at the same location with the Gualala Farmers Market here in Gualala, along with a native plant sale. They're going to have native plants, seeds, and books, and that's going to be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Gualala Community Center. And then we have Goodbye Clothes up in Point Arena. Then we have the Sea Ranch Thespians who are doing auditions this Saturday, October the 28th, from 1 to 3 p.m. That's going to be in the Knit Stengel Barn, and that is being directed by Brian Holderman. You can get in contact with him at brianholderman@yahoo.com if you would like to audition, and it's open to all coastal residents. Parking cards will be available for non-sea ranchers. And then we have the lighted truck parade that's coming after Thanksgiving. That's going to be on November the 25th. And if you would like to have any of your vehicles, it doesn't have to be a truck, it could be anything on wheels, you can contact Kevin and Sylvia Evans at 707-884-9597. I know one year they had to cancel it due to rain, but we're hoping that this Saturday after the Thanksgiving celebration, and they have that on Saturday, that it won't be raining, and they will be starting down at Bedrock and then proceeding through town, and they'll have hot dogs, refreshments, and more. And that's going to do it for our local announcements here. And this is KGUA in Gualala, 88.3 FM. We are streaming around the world at kgua.org, and we are live on YouTube today. We have with us here in the studio Tree Mercer in the background, and then Scott Mercer over here, and they both have been putting their life work towards studying whales, towards studying the ocean and the life within it. And they've been doing this for so many years and tracking the whales up and down our coast. So what I wanted to do today here on this show is find out what they talked about at the lighthouse recently up in Point Arena and what some of the feedback they may have gotten. So let's get started. So Scott, why don't you tell us what you guys presented, and we'll get started there.
Yeah, we kind of based our talk on Ralph Chami
Of the International Monetary Fund, who was on one of our ocean life symposiums one year.
Yeah, and we're getting up-to-date contacts, Steve, so you can have them here on one of your unscheduled Fridays.
I love that.
Yeah, instead of Peggy's place with Leanne. Unscheduled Leanne.
Right.
Every Friday morning.
Unscheduled.
So Ralph's premise is that if whales and certain other organisms have been left alone instead of being greedily taken from the earth, we probably would not be having there's a good chance we would not be having a climate crisis that we're having because of their ability through fertilizing the ocean, harvesting from the ocean themselves, and creating a very productive environment. They're creating tremendous amounts of oxygen, which is the every other breath syndrome that's becoming very popular, finally catching on. So that's what we were talking about was the natural sequestration of carbon, how when whales die, they sink to the bottom and take tons of carbon down with them, which then enriches the seafloor bottom. But that doesn't float back up to the top, the carbon I'm speaking about. It actually goes into the ocean floor and feeds the organisms down there.
So it's like a natural built-in cycle that this planet already had.
Yeah, and something we didn't bring up, we're reading a little more about it now, is the billions of dollars being spent on carbon catching, I'd say plants, but human-made plants, huge facilities along the Texas coastline, the Gulf of Mexico. And then there'll be billions of more spent on huge storage tanks, which mean digging into the ocean floor, more disruption to put these enormous tanks in, and pipelines leading to it from these huge facilities being built on the shore of the Gulf of Mexico, and then pipelines to go underground and then under the ocean seafloor, which will have been dug up to make these huge, just picture enormous tanks being put in the ocean floor now. And Ralph's premise is we can do all this naturally. Animals, nature will take care of this itself.
So back up just a moment. Who is doing the digging and putting in all this stuff? And it seems
The companies involved in the fossil fuel industry.
And
Yeah.
it's very disruptive.
Oh yeah, really huge, huge tanks and also more construction along the Gulf of Maine shoreline, which is in tough shape now with, there are large dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico already from runoff in the Midwest. So that's what we're learning a little bit more about now. In fact, in the new Hakai magazine, which you get online, which is free.
Say the name again.
Hakai, Hakai.
Hakai, okay.
Has an article this morning, we're just reading about this and who's involved with it. Chevron has 50% interest in the first big tank. This first big facility is going to be built in Port Arthur, where Janis Joplin came from. Little trivia.
Our music knowledge fellow over here who's been studying at Stanford. Music background.
Yeah.
So, but that is something I didn't know was happening.
Yeah. Well, actually, speaking of Stanford, a class I took there last year on climate change, through there were photographs of some of these big facilities already been built that are capturing. Let's just picture the in the Gulf of Mexico, the fossil fuel industry has already made billions, and Texas has made billions off of the fossil fuel industry. And now that there's concern, which is probably even seeping into Texas, concern about carbon and climate change, they flipped around and they found a way to make more billions off the same product that they created the carbon problem in the first place.
Anybody doing anything about the building of these storage tanks?
Not that I know of. We're just getting into this now. So that's what we were talking about last Saturday and stuff. Not this so much, but just
So Port Arthur, Texas, and where else?
all along, probably all along the shoreline,
Yeah.
the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow. Boy, that was something new for me, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it does seem very disruptive to all the life, especially when you've got, well, didn't we not long ago have extra warm waters and off the coast of Florida, and they
And the
had
Gulf,
some of
yeah.
the bleaching of the coral reefs there?
Mm.
And then they go and disturb it even further. Doesn't seem like it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So
Um,
what can be done?
well, what can be done is, well, I'm already about knee deep or hip deep in my next talk, which is December, on sea otters. And I've found quite a bit of information on sequestration that they're doing too. Not through so much otter poop as we had whale poop, but when you have sea otters, you have huge biodiversity in an area. And you also have a huge, which brings back the kelp. And the kelp is sequestering tons of carbon itself.
We really need the kelp.
Yeah, finding out a lot about that, more than I knew from college and studying otters before and so forth. There's more that's been found with sea otter restoration. We're finding out more and more about how important they were.
And is it true that kelp actually, with high winds and extra wave action, it helps it grow stronger along our coast?
Probably, yeah. That
Yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
what I've been hearing from some others.
They do keep the dreaded urchins away.
Right.
The motion of the kelp underwater, that motion will actually knocks them back, knocks them out of the way. Something I never heard of before.
But let's take a moment to go back to what Ralph Chalmers was saying. You know, here he is, a fellow with the International Monetary Fund, who took some time off. He did a little sabbatical, and he did it because he had actually been out whale watching and had encountered a large, blue whale, I
Blue
think it
whale, yeah.
was,
Mhm.
right? And then he started trying to find ways to help actually put in laws and ways to encourage people to want to protect whales. But there's a reason why we want to protect whales. Go back a bit and talk about that if you want to step in and talk about that tree.
Sure. And Ralph admits that this would be a real paradigm shift in the way we approach solving
Right.
this problem. But basically, what he's saying is if we let whales live and we protect them, that this is a nature-based solution to climate change. And it makes so much sense after I started to research more about the companies who want to capture and store carbon put in those pipelines, how dangerous they can be. So what Ralph Chalmers is suggesting really makes tremendous sense. It really does. Now, whether our society globally is ready to accept this idea, that remains to be seen, but
Right.
certainly do, I so admire, what he is proposing. So I know it would be good for the ocean, for the planet, land, animals everywhere, including us. So basically saying if we protect the whales from the major threats that exist today, ship strikes, entanglement, debris, in the ocean, and if we make those numbers, the populations come back, they will be able to take a lot of carbon out of the air with no risk. There is no risk like the risks that exist with these pipelines and the storage, and billions of dollars too have to be put into that.
It just seems that there are so many ways that the whales could get more protection. Now, some people their livelihoods are tied to whaling still in this world. I was reading about that not long ago. But just the simple things of, cutting down on ship strikes. And that was one thing I I really liked during this last Ocean Life Symposium, when we had people showing on screen, and you can find this also on our YouTube channel, but how they redirect traffic. If you can talk about that a little bit, Scott, how they had presented up in, where was it, the Northeast
You know, the Bay of
in
Fundy,
Canada, right?
and also Boston Harbor, the two that I'm most familiar with. And also down in Georgia, Florida, with right whales down there. Getting back to, I think you were getting at was the credits that Ralph was talking about.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't remember that much. There was so much information he put out in his hour. on
right.
there that- I do remember that, talking about the credits, the countries who are doing active conservation with carbon should get a credit. If you remember
I
that.
do,
Yeah.
I do. He was talking about some of the nations that were already taking steps to enact laws that would either like correct people who were doing it incorrectly, and even fines and punishments.
Mhm.
So those countries that were already doing that, they were already getting the credits.
Yeah. And what you were asking about a moment ago was, yeah, there have been efforts to redirect ships from well, whales and ships seem to have an uncanny ability to find each other when it comes to shipping lanes and where their preferred food is, which is a big problem outside of San Francisco Bay.
Right.
Um,
The food source, I mean,
Yeah.
that's drawing the whales there. And
I think because of the channel being deeper, it creates a lot of upwelling and turbulence in there. And with more upwelling, you get more of the small organisms busy, and the whales come in to feed on that. But I know last year that a friend of ours, you know, he was in 2 or 3 of our symposiums too. And he didn't show up this year.
oh,
Jack
Yeah, Jack
Barkowski.
Jack
Barkowski.
Barkowski.
wanted to call
I
him
was going to
Roxy.
say Michael Stalker, but
He sent out an interesting news recently. Yeah, well, Jack couldn't make it to the talk, but he told me last year when we were counting humpbacks at Point Arena, in case of higher numbers sticking around and because of entanglements. And remember the crab season was set back until almost January, and then the floods came. So we're hoping
Right.
everybody's happy this year and doesn't stick around as much and we don't get flooded again. For the shipping lanes, yeah, I didn't know if you slipped another question.
but I am next. So
Yeah, so in the Bay of Fundy with the highly endangered right whales back in the 80s, the right whales were coming in more to the east by Nova Scotia on that side of the Bay of Fundy. One side is Maine and New Brunswick, the other side is Nova Scotia. They were coming in close that way and closer to the Nova Scotia side. Then the shipping lanes were moved a bit. So they weren't coming right through the middle of where the copepods, what they feed on.
right.
We did a lot of copepod talks out of it. Could have even had some more slides of them. And
That was in your talk too.
yeah. And I'm just thinking, I was asking people again, how many of you have seen SpongeBob SquarePants? And I think 2 or 3 hands went up. What a shame.
I know. Like I said, my son did do a video game design on one of the games.
And
I guess it's getting too old of a cartoon for.
I think it's
some-
still on now.
It's still on
Nickelodeon.
Nickelodeon.
It's hilarious too, and it is educational in its own way.
And so which character was the copepod again?
He was just Copepod.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was the name.
if I remember right, yeah. I rattled off a few of the names of people who weren't familiar with the show Saturday, but I want to keep it moving.
Yes.
It ran over half an hour as it was. I don't want to get Mark too upset.
Half an hour it went over.
Yeah. So you got to work with the shipping companies, you got to work with, and this is in the Bay of Fundy, you need to work internationally. You got
Right.
Canada on one side, and US on the other, and where ships go makes a difference. So one other thing I mentioned, speaking of the Bay of Fundy, there was there was an oil company that wanted to put a refinery in Eastport, Maine, which is one of those postcard places that Maine is very, very proud of. And right whales and eagles stopped that back in maybe 1981 or 1982. So, you know, they had documented the right whales were in there, and then the documentation of nesting eagles and so forth, and that put an end to that. It really wasn't needed anyway.
Well, I really like how they are making efforts to change the lanes where these huge ships go. And it is hard because the whales, you know, they base their location on sound. And if they hear this sound that's somewhere in the ocean, they don't really know quite right where it is.
They're surrounded by this racket.
Right. And they don't know where that propeller is coming from.
Right. We had a fairly dramatic on the video
Yes.
that we showed. Why don't you explain that?
Yes, it was, Scott found it and he said, Tree, can you get this into our presentation? And I did. It was very startling. So it showed ships moving with these brown lines, ships going everywhere. And in the middle of it was a blue whale attempting to feed. Yeah. And, you know, and whales as big as they are compared to these gigantic cargo ships.
Right.
Right.
They're so much smaller than just these gigantic, even though they're so huge.
Right. Even a blue whale, 100 feet long, but that's nothing compared to the size of these gigantic cargo ships. So there were the shipping lanes coming in, and this was real. This was taken in real time. Then in blue, there's a little blue creature was to represent the blue whale, and he's trying to feed. And he goes here, and then, you know, he knows he has to move if he senses that that's not safe. It really was impactful, Leanne. You know, I could hear and see the people's reaction to it. It's a big problem, and I know
it was a tagged blue whale, so it was all data.
Oh, that's how they could see
Yeah, it
it.
was
Because
tagged.
Tree is sitting here moving her hand all around. You can't quite see it on the radio, but you know, that poor blue whale was just trying to avoid all the different ships around it. What eventually happened?
With that one, I don't really know the outcome. You know, hopefully, well, the main thing is let's hope the blue whale was not struck, you know, by a ship.
But you show how the chances of not getting struck are very low because of that particular situation.
Yeah, this was a tagged whale, so the actual routes it was taking, dodging around, trying to feed, and they had animation of the ships where they had gone because there's a record of where they go and where they move. That's how they know what speed ships are going, coming and going. So it was all computerized.
Right.
And it actually showed this little blue dot. It would come into an open spot. Within seconds, there'd be 3 big ships going right through there.
Is there any way to see this animation anywhere?
Oh,
We thought about bringing it today.
Yeah.
Did you find it online somewhere? Though?
Yeah, I found it in one of the headlines that gets sent to me, and it turned out it was YouTube. But I got to play when I was reading the news, and then YouTube, and then she was able to extract it and get it into our PowerPoint.
Oh, great. So you can probably just put a bunch of search terms in and be able to bring it up.
Yeah, it's powerful. It really is. And the other thing about the ships is the speed at which they go.
That definitely was something in the Ocean Life Symposium that they talked about. Just reducing the speed made a huge difference.
Absolutely. And it can't be voluntary. It has to be mandatory speed limits. Here on the West Coast in last summer, 22, a very well-known humpback whale named Fran, 17 years old. So she was still quite young in humpback years, humpback whale years.
How old do they live?
60, maybe even
90.
Yeah, maybe even more.
Even 90 or more.
Yeah.
Some species live to be over 200.
Oh,
Wow.
That's documented.
So it's young compared
yeah,
to.
she's very young, but
Right.
she was a whale she was the most photographed humpback here on the California coast. She had a calf with her. And last summer, sadly, she was struck and killed by a ship. And when they did the necropsy, and she happened to wash ashore, when the necropsy was performed, she was struck with such force that her spinal cord was severed in her neck from her head area. She was struck twice and, probably hopefully killed immediately. So she did not suffer.
Right.
Luckily, her calf was old enough to feed on its own. So, the calf has been sighted. So the calf survived. So that was very good. Our friend and colleague, someone Scott's known since he was a little boy, and Ted Cheeseman, who runs Happy Whale,
Right.
where he identifies, he has a tremendous database of whale flukes, and whale flukes identify individual whales, like our fingerprints can identify us. And so Teddy had amassed many, many photos of this particular whale. And talking with him about this tragedy, he said to me something I'll never forget. He said, if these type of incidences would take place on land, where a fast moving vehicle was just plowing down animals that we love, people would be outraged. There'd be an uproar. But when it happens in the ocean, no one sees it. We're not aware of it.
No.
And he said, we have to do better. We have to, get these ships to slow down, move the shipping lanes. And they've been developing something called the Whale Safe program. And they have, they call it a smart buoy in the bay, in San Francisco Bay. And it sends its information via a satellite. So attached to the buoy, unfortunately, it is a vertical line, which is not safe for whales with entanglements. But there's hydrophones attached to this buoy, which pick up whale sounds in the area. This gets transmitted to a satellite, and then that information can be sent to ships to alert them that there's whale activity in the area and to slow down and be on the lookout for whales that may be in the area. So they're really perfecting this, technology to hopefully reduce these horrible collisions.
And let's talk about the rope and gear. And Scott, if you can talk to this about what kind of ropeless gear technology is underway, and how do you get a whole fishing industry to be able to change to something like this?
Well, I'm most familiar with lobstering in Maine, and it's a tough process because of the traditions and the technology, or lack of technology, has been going on for centuries, a few hundred years in Maine, getting people to change and also to trust the gear. Because my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, this is what you hear, my great-great-grandfather had a buoy on one end, threw the trap in the water, baited, and then the next day they pulled it back up. What's wrong with that is what you hear. And most of them have never seen a whale either when you talk to them. When I was doing porpoise entanglements, the same thing. Porpoises, we never see a porpoise. Be 12 going by the boat. And, seriously, we get a lot of that back east, especially. That's where my experience is.
Are they saying that to be facetious, or are they serious?
Never seen a right whale.
I heard those discussions. There's no right whales here in Maine.
When I was out gill netting, when some people needed help, and they were bringing the nets in, and harbor porpoise were coming in the nets, very dead, along with the codfish and so forth, which nets are designed for. And the guys I was on the boat with, who worked there, they were really upset about it. Not just that I was seeing it, just that they were upset. They said, "Yeah, this happens every now and then." And then there were other people, and the word got out was, "I don't know what you're talking about." We were to interview people. Never see a harbor porpoise.
But they're getting entangled in these things. Yes.
Yeah, and then when I called the smart people, figure out the effort, number of boats, the number of days, and how many porpoise have been counted, do their extrapolations, come up with a pretty high number. So out of that came the another project I worked on, came the Pinger project. These about the size of a battery, flashlight battery. And in fact, I forgot to bring one Saturday, but they make this high pitch ping, ping noise. And that was supposed to be deter porpoises when they're chasing fish. And then the fishermen were worried that would scare the fish too, but it did work. It did cut down. All of a sudden, the entanglements did drop some from that.
So say that again. How?
The ping part.
Yeah.
I can't get up. It would be in a little. It looked like the lobster bait nets. It's kind of a mesh net. You put the finger in that. It's the size of standard flashlight battery, and you tie it somewhere on the gill net, the end of the gill net itself, probably where the edge of the cloth was, and then you put all that down in the water. And gill nets are like enormously long. It can be over a mile long, a tennis net or a volleyball net.
Well, it catches everything then.
Yeah,
It does.
and it's almost like flypaper. You get caught up in one of those. I showed we showed a photo last Saturday in the show of a whale that's completely tangled up in these gill nets. That gill net was probably half a mile or a mile long. The whale got wrapped up in layer after layer of this stuff. It was just
Immobilized.
yeah, mobilized.
Yeah.
So the idea was put some of these fingers along that, however long the net was. They make that high pitched sound and notify. The word I'm trying to think of, notify the marine mammal that there's something they're not used to.
And why
hearing.
would it not prevent the fish from coming in?
It just never did.
It just never did.
No, that was one of the concerns. And with the getting back to the ropeless gear, that's a method where there's let's make it simple. There's a button up in the pilot house, kind of like the old what's the number? That was easy.
Oh, Staples or something
Yeah.
like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Pushed a button. That was easy.
Yeah.
They push a button up in the pilot house that sets off an electric signal that is received by lobster traps are put out in trawls, maybe 12 tied together along the bottom.
oh,
The
this
whales
I
don't
did
do
not realize. They're-
Whales don't get trapped in that.
Ah.
But the lead trap, the first one would be the last one that left the
that
boat.
has the
the first
line
one
to the
up.
top.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's the high flyer, the pole that goes up now with the lobster trap. There's the lobster buoy that tourists can't buy enough of if there's a summer. Each lobsterman has its own color on the buoy. And they grab that when you get up to the buoy, you grab that, pull it in, put the rope in the winch, which then automatically,
And brings all of them up.
yeah,
Right.
now you don't need that vertical line because that comes up. The first strap on the bottom, which was the last one to leave the boat, the first one back has an inflatable, has a little capsule with it, which opens up automatically when that signal hits it.
And poof.
Yep, and it brings the whole trawl up, all those traps.
And so no rope
No,
in the water to entangle anything, just
nothing vertical.
nothing vertical.
As our friend Scott Landry at Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown has said, you get a vertical line, you're going to have an entangled animal. They have disentangled thousands of sea turtles, whales, seabirds, small animals, basking sharks.
Well, I should take a moment to let our audience know that you're listening to the voices of Scott and Tree Mercer, and they have Mendonoma whale and seal study. They've been doing this for years. Their history includes going way back to teaching in classrooms, to going and taking tourists out on boats so that they can continue their studies. And this is KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM. I'm Lindsey, the host today, and we are on YouTube, so you can watch us there, and you can also go back and find some of the ocean life symposiums that we've done here too, and a lot of the updates on our ocean there too. But I thought we'd take a moment today and talk with Scott and Tree about some of these issues that we've been talking about today, but also about the their lighthouse presentation that they just did this past weekend, I believe it was. And we got into talking about entanglements and ship strikes and slowing ships down to help protect the whales. And so, Scott, again, with the ropeless gear technology, how it's going to be hard for a lot of people to adopt this because they just can't afford to do so. How are some of the ways that they can be assisted and helped in this way?
Well, because so much of the economy in Maine is based on tourism and lobstering. I forget the phenomenal amount of money that the lobster industry is worth, but you can get lobster products across the street in the surf market. And a lot of, from Eastport, Maine, along the Maine coast. And they're tied together because when tourists come up to Maine, they all want that two lobster special.
Right.
When it drops down to $10.95, the cars are already lined up in the parking lot. So you see
So
that all the way along.
demand is there,
Yeah, so it's actually hand in hand, hand in claw.
right? Hand in glove.
Where they do, they come up and train new people in Long Island, New York, who can't wait to get back to Maine and have another lobster. So they in lobster rolls and all that.
Lobster rolls.
It's
I was
just a
just
huge,
thinking
huge
that.
industry,
Yeah.
the two together. So with that, to get the technology going and make it cheaper. One of the questions I got at the end of the talk was somebody asked me if there's anybody working on making the technology more accessible and cheaper. And I think probably be a race on for that.
Well, there you are in the Point Arena area where there's a lot of fisher folks.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
and you mentioned, oh, you're familiar with them down the street here.
Bodega.
Bodega, Dick
Yeah.
Hogg.
Oh, yes, Dick Hogg.
Yeah, he's been very helpful with the
Dick
crabbing.
Hogg.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was featured in Three Ocean Advocates,
Yes.
Cynthia
Yeah,
Abbott's film.
Sebastopol.
He sure was.
Yeah, he's been great, very helpful, and like even Zach Cliver knows him. They're in Bangor,
Of
Maine,
all things.
Yeah.
and Zach's been so involved in both coasts in developing this ropeless. So, and then getting back to the shipping, I actually making grants available, and
Grants.
yeah, to make it more accessible to the lobster.
That's great.
Yeah, that's my experience, of course, with the lobster industry. But
There's got to be some support,
Yeah.
that they can be provided with this through government funds, through some resources, perhaps. Maybe certain industries are developed that could raise the money to help provide this.
Tree and I went to one of the hearings, up and down the coast all the time about, and they're so opposed to the lobstering industry. They've got the entire congressional delegation in Maine on their side because there's so many votes, so many people working in the industry.
Well, it's
You can't
expensive,
crack through that.
and then they need help.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if you take that fear away, adoption is going to be easier.
Yeah, so it's been effective 100% of the time that it's been used. Zach was staying at our house and getting up early and going out on Kennebunk Port, Maine, working with some lobstermen there. And every time, all the experiments they did with the traps, with this gear was coming up 100% of the time. They never lost anything. And that's the other guarantee is if they lose gear, they can push the button and nothing happens. That they won't lose out on that.
How does Zach go about connecting with all the industry, the people in the industry, and does he have support in that area? His name is Zach Cliver.
Yeah. Well, he was just at the time, I think OPC he was going down the docks and just asking who would be willing to, and there was a lot of animosity. And he told me last year he couldn't take any more lobstermen yelling at him. He's going to get out of it for a while.
But they're yelling at him because they can't afford it,
they're afraid it's going to be forced on them.
and it's going to be forced on them.
Yeah, they won't go
See,
lobstering. Let's say.
If they can be given a way that says, look, this is not going to cost you, but if it's going to cost them, of course they're going to be adamant against it.
Yeah, yeah. It won't be forced on them. It'll be Well, actually, they've kind of had a veiled threats, I think, from, yeah, because they are a highly endangered species, the right whales.
Mhm.
And a lot of humpbacks get wrapped up in it too. You know, they're afraid it isn't gonna be forced on them. They'll be, just be told you have to use I don't even think it's enough to go around yet.
Mhm.
It's enough of this
Because
technology.
fishing is, the industry is hard
Mhm.
and it's a struggle, you know, to make ends meet. And if you've got another huge thing that you've got to pay, it's just kind of like owning a home. Suddenly you find out, oh, property taxes have gone up.
Mhm.
Oh, suddenly my home insurance is, you know, tripled in cost.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly. But an advantage, if this technology is perfected, the advantage would be that they wouldn't have to close the season. You know, when during high traffic time of high presence of these endangered whales and other species,
bonus.
yes, they would be able to fish almost year round, or whenever the crabs or the lobsters were most abundant, because there'd be no threats. So that would be, a tremendous advantage. There'd be no closing of the crab season or the lobster season.
So show the percentage of the increased revenue that they can bring in
Right.
is an incentive, a bonus towards doing this.
I would think so.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the rope is actually a danger to the people using it. Every year there are lobster men or women who might lose their life because they get caught up in the ropes. So it's also a danger to them. And this could be a much safer way of fishing for lobster and crab without such a threat to the people using those ropes.
I want to just switch gears for a second and address something else that's happening off of our coastline here on the West Coast, and that is the installation of new wind turbine platforms. Of course, we need other alternatives to our power sources, right? But at the same time, we don't want to be causing extra problems. Are we making it worse, or how do they go about avoiding some of the? They said that these platforms currently, the new ones, aren't tethered to a base. So I'm not quite sure how that works, or if you guys have been looking into it.
Well, I know mostly what Richard Charter has been saying from Bodega Bay. And
he is the senior fellow of the Ocean
Conservation?
that's
Ocean
Michael.
Oh, yeah, sorry. That's right.
of
Yeah,
which
Richard, yeah, I can't remember the name of this.
Yeah.
Ocean Conservancy, or no?
It might be that.
Yeah, it might be that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of acronyms. going
Yeah.
on.
I know.
Yeah.
Somebody look up Richard Charter.
No, I mean, Richard's just an encyclopedia. He goes to a conference like he hit a record button. It's on his chin somewhere, directly to his brain. Yeah, actually, you remember Tessa Foster from our Ocean Life
The
Symposium?
Ocean Foundation,
Yeah, he's a senior fellow with them.
senior fellow.
Yeah.
Okay, and he lives right here in Bodega Bay.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
we have Michael Stalker in Inverness.
And Michael Stalker in
Michael is-
Everett, who studies noise in the ocean,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Acoustics.
acoustics.
So we have those two right here, and they're tremendous resources. But Michael gave the last symposium he was in was the one, each person had an hour.
Yep.
And he went on about the pounding and how it affects even some of the small invertebrates that are important in the ocean.
That's why even putting these pipelines in is disturbing all of that.
In fact, Michael's talk can be heard on YouTube here at KGUA, because that entire symposium,
That's right.
like all the others, was recorded. So I think that was Ocean Life Symposium 3. The time we had 20 speakers here for 4 days.
Mhm.
And
That was a big one.
Yes,
yeah,
it was.
and that's all recorded. Anybody who wants to know about that. And I'm sure that Richard's talks have been probably here somewhere on that.
I may have to go in and edit some of them into separate speeches. but
Tessa Foster, who been in a couple of our,
Oh, right, Tessa.
of the British accent you like so much.
Yeah, and she's really making such headway and progress. And
She's delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she showed up Saturday, completely unknown
she
to us.
did.
She
And
did.
brought her parents,
Huh.
who then stayed at the Lighthouse Housing, which made Mark happy.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a fantastic supply. We haven't really seen her in 3 years, so it was a big surprise. And we corresponded with her a little the last few years, but
How wonderful.
yeah, so I think you should get her in your voiceovers.
Definitely.
It'd be good on some of the commercial
We could
announcements.
update a few of them.
Yeah.
So what did she talk about when she saw you?
No, we just got caught up a little bit.
Ah.
And she was with her family for the night, just from the overnight.
We, Peggy and Susan and I have stayed in the Lighthouse buildings there. They're really nice, nicely furnished. They've been refurbished, as a matter of fact. All the different lighthouse, what do they call them? Just the
Like
keepers
quarters. and-
quarters, but they're available to the public to rent
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
stay
Yeah.
in.
They're
Yeah.
lovely apartment, almost apartment-like,
And you get
know?
to hear the crashing of the
Mm.
waves during the night because it's on both sides. You're out on this little peninsula,
Yeah, front yard and backyard.
right?
And sunsets, so
And
it's just,
sunsets
and
and-
whales passing by. This is a
And
wonderful
this is where
place.
you guys sit most of the time studying with those long
Yeah,
binoculars.
That's right.
facing to the west side. Tess is gonna, has offered, wanted to get involved with us with, she's not really able to do field work during the days, but to do some research for us and some background research. And one that she's interested in is the placement of the turbine,
Mm,
So
that.
she'd do some of the research on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
And the noise involved with that, where Michael's project comes in too, but Richard Charter really has a lot of information on that, which is all down in our area, actually. And one other thing we didn't mention was the ship traffic and the slowing down.
Yes,
There are commendations that go out to the companies, because all these ships are on radars and coming in. Coming into Boston Harbor, any of these harbors, there's a big rate, just like airplanes coming in. You don't know where these ships are.
right.
And so there are speeds, tell what speed ships are coming in, just like an airplane. And the ones that are complying with these volunteer rules. Again, nobody's mandating, they're just requesting, because you don't want to stop the carnage out there in the shipping lanes. So the ones who are complying with that are getting diplomas that they're actually framing now and putting in their corporate headquarters on the hallways.
They're proud of them. They're
Yeah.
getting these commendations.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they're putting in the
Like
publicity
this.
too, that we comply with voluntarily.
I love it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they have found, there was an article I read last week, that only 6% of the companies who don't know they're being followed or feel they're not being, watched by, are complying with the volunteering with these.
Only 6%.
We found only 6% are slowing down.
So there's got to be a way to incentivize them a little bit more, right?
for sure.
Hopefully Ralph Tommy's working on it.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
they're trying to avoid fines and all that, just ask them to slow down.
Right.
I mean, I know from experience that it's not easy, especially these big ships coming into a place like by the Farallones into the harbor here. You have winds, rough seas, strong currents. It can be hard to get one of those ships into 10 knots, but if you make their best effort,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes, that would make a
I mean, think of a
difference.
stall speed on an airplane.
Exactly. I'm
You
a
know,
pilot, so I
There's only
get
so
that.
much you can do,
Right.
you gotta deal with the cross currents and the wind and so forth. But yeah, I've done a lot of talking about it.
Another part of our presentation dealt with plastics in the ocean and microplastics. We actually had a slide that showed the tiniest of zooplankton. These are animal-like plankton in the ocean, and under a microscope, probably electron, I'm not sure what type of microscope, maybe an electron microscope, there are pictures of them. And in fluorescent green was showing that even the smallest of these organisms ingesting microplastics.
There's no way to get away from it. It's in
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
hopefully we can evolve and learn to live with it, but we need to reduce
Yeah.
the plastic. And it's so hard because it's about everything you get at the grocery or you order online. It comes just, wrapped in some kind of plastic. Even the smallest, tiniest of plastic that comes that you have to pull off something,
Mhm.
then you like carefully put that into the garbage. Then where does that go?
Exactly, exactly. But you had alerted us of this incredible young man named
Right.
Boyan Slat, S-L-A-T, when he was only 16 years old. He and his family, he's from the Netherlands. He and his family were vacationing in Greece, and he went scuba diving. And when he was scuba diving in the ocean, what do you think he saw a lot of that disturbed him?
The plastic.
Yes, he saw plastic bags everywhere.
Right.
At 16
It's like
years
these
old.
floating islands of plastic
Yeah.
and garbage.
So this disturbed him greatly as a 16-year-old. And then at the ripe old age of 18, he began a project simply called the Ocean Cleanup. And he was determined, as insurmountable as it may seem, but he was determined to make a difference and to get the plastic out of the ocean.
Well, he's raised a lot of money because I could see some of those big ships that they were using.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
he began the Ocean Cleanup, and I mean, I've learned so much about it thanks to you. And
You're welcome.
yeah, so and we had actually a video clip about his latest system. They call it. This is the third revision, and these two ships go out with what they describe really as just like a collection, like a garbage bag, and it's enormous. Vast amount of the ocean that they cover, and they literally they extract plastics from the ocean. And where they're working is right in the Pacific, the Pacific Great Garbage Patch, I believe it's called. It's between California and Hawaii. And so the two ships work together, and then they bring it on board of the ship. They bring it back in, and then and it was very powerful seeing this in a video because people could see this tremendous piles and piles of plastic that came out of the ocean. And then they begin to put it into categories about how it can be recycled.
Ah, very good.
Yeah.
They're not bringing it out and burying it.
No,
The
no.
net was about 20 feet high.
Mm,
It must have been what you saw on Jane Polly's show. It was
Yeah.
probably the same.
Yeah.
And net was about 20 feet vertical. They pulled it, what's called a cod end on a fishing net, and that just spilled out. It
mm.
just kept coming out, coming out, and coming out. It's enormous. Probably about 2 stories high and 30 feet across or something, just full of plastics.
It was startling, to see the amount that they got out, and then they'll go out again and again. But he's being, really innovative because they know that, well, what's the way that the plastics get into the ocean? Through the rivers.
That's right.
So he's also doing the extraction of plastics in the river before they even make it into the oceans.
I saw it. There was a video of that in Los Angeles area, I think it was.
Could be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Say his name again.
Boyan Slat, S-L-A-T. And
Right.
now he's at the ripe old age of, I think, 28 or 29.
But he's making just enormous strides towards reducing the plastic in our oceans.
Yes. Yeah, it's impressive. And
Yeah.
and I'm glad we incorporated that into our presentation because we want people to see that there's hope. There are things that make a difference, and there are people who care that this isn't, because really, especially the part of the presentation that was threats, it's pretty sad and depressing, but there is hope. There are people who care.
There are people who care, and sometimes it gets to be very disheartening because you see one thing after the next, and you think, how are we ever going to make it out of this. But then you hear about people like this, or you hear about those that are trying to do ropeless gear technology. You hear about those who are trying to change the ship lanes or slow the ship down, and those that are complying out of, without being mandated, they're doing it on their own. And so, I mean, there are ways that we can address this. That's what I found very encouraging when Ralph Chami came on, and he goes, hey, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm here to tell you how we can do some things that can help. And that had our attention, because we were like, oh yeah, okay, so how can just about anybody, make a difference? And talk about the number of trees. Again, I just want to bring that point up. That one whale over the lifetime, then we're talking the largest, like the blue whale.
Yeah, he calls them the great whales.
The great
That's right.
whales.
Yeah. I guess most of them are baleen whales. They're the blue whale, the finback, second largest animal on the planet, finback whale, the humpback, the gray whale, sperm whale. Any others?
The sperm whale has some choppers.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
realize
they're
that.
probably the largest, only really large great whales.
Toothed whale, yeah.
But they sequester all this carbon
Right.
over their lifetime to the amount of how many trees?
1,500
Okay.
is the estimate.
That's a lot of trees.
That's a lot of trees.
Right.
It is. And one whale can do that. And
And in terms of whaling, a dead whale's worth $40,000. A living whale's worth millions.
millions, right, over their
So once you
lifetime.
get into people's heads, then it comes down to dollars. And
That's the changing the mindset here.
That
That's
paradigm
that
shift.
paradigm shift
Mhm.
to get people to see the difference in value. And that's why Ralph Chami of the International Monetary Fund was here on the Ocean Life
I
Symposium.
remember when I gave you guys here at the station the speaker list.
Yeah, yeah.
We're all scratching our heads
Yeah.
like, the IMF?
Yeah.
What?
He's an economist, and he sees the value of a whale
Right.
in very, very real terms.
And he can make changes and help put in through different organizations that can change the rules and say, hey, well, you can get compensated for not doing this one thing.
Mhm.
You can get compensated this way, and put in laws also to say you can also be punished
Yes,
if you don't
you have to be
comply.
accountable.
You have to be
Yeah,
accountable.
absolutely.
Because there's a reason that we're trying to protect
Mhm.
these living beings.
Yes.
Now, you also were saying that you're just about knee deep in studying sea lions, right?
Sea otters.
Sea otters,
Yeah.
excuse me, sea otters. So let's go to that point, Scott. This is Scott Mercer and Tree Mercer. I'm Leigh Lindsey. This is KGUA in Wallala.
Yeah, that will be our December talk, or just mine. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see.
she does the
Yeah.
technology with it. Yeah, it's funny because we always have to rehearse at the lighthouse with Mark, the director. And there's always some little glitch. Man, we
Always.
get on there, 3 times before the talk and rehearse with Mark.
Oh, hey, when I was in the tech industry,
Yeah.
it was hilarious because I'm going in with technology companies,
Yeah.
the CEOs, the engineers, to a venture capital firm, sitting down in front of all these VCs around the table. And what happens? The technology doesn't work. And we're trying to get them to fund us.
Yeah. Oh.
A lot of fun. So it happens to you guys too.
Yeah, and we've had far worse problems, like when we had the infrared camera, we were experimenting with Toyon Industries with that. To count gray whales at night going by Point Marina. And we
They
had,
put those up, didn't they?
Yeah, we had it here for a whole week. That was so
Right.
exciting.
yeah, it
Right.
was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Except, I said here before, anything that could go wrong on a marine mammal research week went wrong that week. We had a small earthquake that knocked the power out, and it just went high winds, rain, pouring rain.
Freezing
And,
temperatures. It
temperatures
was-
down in the 30s in the morning, howling winds. We had to hold that infrared camera. The one we began calling it Fred for infrared. How's Fred doing out there? And we had cement blocks on it to keep it down. We said to Christina at the Marine Mammal Conference in Monterey, "Oh yeah, no problem. It's November, no problem." So
Famous
she
last
sends me
words.
emails every now and then. Some horrible sea conditions. Point Arena. Interesting.
Well, can you believe it? We're having
my
way
goodness.
too much fun.
Yeah.
We're at the end of our hour.
Oh, yeah.
And this is Scott and Tree Mercer. Their next talk is coming up in December.
Right, and in November, Shari Goforth is giving a
That's
great
right.
talk. I'm so excited for that. She is a tremendous photographer, but even more than that, she knows how to identify whales. And she's going to teach us
Yeah.
all about that.
They were
She's
repeating
wonderful.
last Saturday's talk twice the next 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And
Where will it be
we're
repeated?
doing it in person at Fort Ross.
Oh, great.
And before that, they'll set down the date. It would be January 16, 17, or 18 online for NOYO Center for Marine Science.
And
We'll
that's,
be doing that on Zoom some evening for NOYO Center.
so stay tuned for all of those wonderful things happening. We're going to have to say goodbye to our radio audience and our YouTube audience.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
This is Scott and Tree Mercer of Mindanoma Whale and Seal Study. I'm Lindsey, your host today on KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM, streaming at kgua.org.